So welcome everyone to the space. Super excited to have everyone. My name is Kelly Sharp. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the Director of Medical Humanities here at UCI, and I'm so excited to welcome Maggie Woodruff to our space and look forward to hearing about your work. Also, just want to give a little bit of a background. They have a working on their PhD in anthropology here at UCI, and also an eviction defense attorney with the Public Law Center in Santa Ana, and began working on their JD PhD program in 2017 and completed their JD in 2021. A very interesting time to finish school, definitely. And Maggie returned to social sciences to work on their dissertation work. So Maggie enjoys making music. What kind of instrument do you play? Or
I play bass, a little bit of piano, a little bit of guitar.
oh, wonderful. It's so good for your brain. Excellent. So welcome. I won't take any more of individuals' time, but really appreciate everyone being here. And I am going to turn off my screen now. So thank you.
Thanks everyone so much for coming. There is so much going on in the world right now. So I'll do my best to be um, coherent, cohesive. Um, and I look forward to hearing any of your questions that you might have at the end. So I'm going to share a link in the chat, which is to instead of slides today, I have a website that I have kind of created, and I'll walk you through it. But the link is to the live website so that you can click around as well. All right, I'm going to share my screen. My screen that I'm sharing is the Notion app. But if you click on the link, then you'll be taken to the Notion website. So this working title, Productive Encounters, Bureaucracy, Dispossession, and Discourse of Unhoused LA. Like this project, like the world, like myself, it's a work in progress, subject to change. So I'm just gonna dive right into these lenses. Project snapshot. My dissertation work has been advised over time by these people. I've been really fortunate to be funded by the Center for Medical Humanities, as well as the Wenner-Gren Foundation and the National Science Foundation, their Law and Science dissertation grant. Time to degree. I got my law degree in 2021, my master's in 2022, and my goal is to finish next year, 2025. Who knows? To give you some background of this project, these images are from an experience I had the summer of 2020, a quite chaotic summer. I was working for an Orange County organization called Elder Law and Disability Rights Center, and part of the work was observing these weekly sweeps that were part of a settlement. And they really influenced my understanding of homelessness and governance in Southern California. I have just been kind of haunted by the anxiety that I felt at these sweeps, the number of people, the diversity of interests represented, and this just fact of a claw dropping a bed, a couch, a bike into this dumpster. So what is homelessness? I mean, the population is really large in Los Angeles. It's also been identified how many human rights violations, civil rights violations are going on in relation to dealing with Orange County homelessness and Los Angeles homelessness. Some of the things that I think are more poignant about homelessness in LA as compared to the rest of the country are the emphasis on visibility and aesthetics, the importance of industry and labor to this town, and the climate, the environment. All things that have had a lot of uh, chaos, a lot of just issues bubbling up. I also was really learning a lot. This was like during my summer, my legal education. And so I was learning a lot about what it meant to be a lawyer, how to do public interest work or movement law work in this field that is historically white supremacist and dominated by corporate interests. How do I be a good lawyer, an effective lawyer? And then also just at the base of all of these are my questions about how do we share space? How do we get basic needs met? How do we have spaces where people can build culture and community? How do we resolve these inequalities? Um, and so this really came to be a project about tracing the encounter with the unhoused as a data point that changes over time. And I'll go into a little bit about the methods that I have used to narrow down on this project. My training, anthropology and law. Anthropology, you could say, is the study of human meaning making. We do ethnography, some of the more social science methods that you might be familiar with, participant observation, interviews, surveys, archival production. And we want to know what people say they do. And then we want to observe and like become part of what are they actually doing. I don't know if you can hear the helicopters in the background, but they just started again. And then I also have just been influenced by different classes and projects with science and technology, material cultures, psychoanalysis, looking at scale, the global, local, urban. Law, just expressions of power, authority, and judgment. I think that's how I would describe what the law is. And I've had experience with litigation, which is this sort of oppositional addressing of harm, fact production. And I've had experience with direct services, which can be education, serving as a witness for your client, doing some legal triage. And then some of my experiences have been also with environmental protection, civil rights. And in law school, I was heavily influenced by the socio-legal scholarship that I started to get exposed to, looking at how gender, race, disability, and the profession itself navigates navigates the law. This project is also a meta methodological journey. So as anthropologists, we are wanting to understand what is happening in an encounter, or we're wanting to interpret cultures. And the law is all about, interpreting, or practicing law can be all about interpreting the law. So already my methods, my professions are about interpreting. But then looking at these encounters with unhoused people, specifically, there's so many interpretive methods that are being done by people who are coming to do those encounters. And then there are also just various ethics and standards across these different professions that come to play. I also have, I wrote weaving my own experiences with police, housing, and healthcare because that's influencing my approach to this project. I have, in the past year, been the victim of 2 different property crimes, which I had to call police for so I could get, reports for insurance. I've moved 3 times. I'll be moving a 4th time in the next month. 2 of those moves were moments of me being displaced against my will. And I, constantly am battling insurance and pharmacies to get the healthcare that I need. And try to get it paid for, though it is not always. And so these experiences have really, they are not separate from the work that I'm doing. And lastly, I just want to emphasize that I view my project as engaged or critical or activist or however you want to put it, because I'm not doing this project just for knowledge's sake. I'm doing this project because I want to have an effect on the things I'm studying. And I won't deny that. It's like a key tenet. So moving on to my research questions, how does the encounter get documented? And to just to give a little bit more explanation about, I'll go back to these pictures, what was going on here. In the background, there are service providers, there are business owners, there are community like citizens, there are, and those service providers might be providing housing, they might be providing detox meds, they are part of the healthcare agency, sometimes the homelessness task force specifically, and then there are volunteers, and me, a lawyer, not quite a lawyer at the time, but the legal profession. And various of these groups are taking notes or producing records based on what is going on at this sweep. And those records then become part of the practice of law, such as litigation outside of this, or they might be invoked by specific laws. So that's a little bit more just about the weaving of what an encounter might be, the records that are getting produced from it, and why they're being produced. And so just to go back to these research questions, how is the encounter documented? Who's collecting knowledge? Who has access to this knowledge? What is the purpose of this knowledge? What is it going to do? What are its effects? I look at how the encounter takes place. What are the legal logics governing the place of the encounter? So public, private ownership. How does the encounter happen and why? Where does the encounter happen and why? And these terms on the right are sort of cluing into different literatures that I'm looking at. I think going into those literatures in detail might be a little boring. So I'm going to stick with the details, the data itself. And then lastly, how is the encounter experienced? This question, I think, is the most unsure for me, the most, I'm still working it out. I think I still need to figure out what people are saying and what they're experiencing beyond my own experience of the things I've encountered. But I know that there are things getting left out. And so this is sort of a question about what is going on in the negative space. Okay, moving on to sites. So I'm going to walk you through three different points of data collection. I participated in the annual point in time count. In some places it's biannual. In Venice and downtown Los Angeles, those are both under the auspices of the LA count. And then I also participated in the Long Beach count. This was quite a crazy 48 hours. I did an 8 p.m. to midnight shift in Venice, drove to Long Beach to get like a few hours of sleep in Long Beach, then showed up for the 4:30 to 10 a.m. count in Long Beach, went home, slept a little bit, drove back to downtown LA for that night, the next 8 to midnight shift. And in doing these three different sites, I was able to see a lot of different, I was able to make comparisons about the different methods such as in Los Angeles, there's no police presence when you go in your little groups. But there is in Long Beach. Seeing how the media came to these different deployment sites and how much media there was or how little there was really interesting. Seeing the budget, like which site had the best snacks, which site spent the most money on these participants. Did you get a certificate in LA or did you get a t-shirt in Long Beach? And then I've been doing interviews, following up with the professionals and the volunteers that were involved in the point in time count. If you don't know what the point in time count is, let's talk about it. So the 1987 McKinney-Vento Act, it's kind of about money. Where does grant money go? It developed a breakdown across the country of continuums of care, or COCs. And these are, as this website says, community-based coalitions of nonprofit and government entities that help address homelessness. And you can see over here all these different COCs. In California, there's a lot. Each COC is going to do their own point in time count. HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department of the federal US government, only requires it biennially, but there are places that do it annually. And this picture right here is a further breakdown of within COCs, each group, because there might be, let's say, like 70 volunteers at the Long Beach count. Those are broken up into different subgroups that are assigned a census tract that you might see by this outline here. And you drive or walk around the census tract and count. How do you count? You count on your phone, you count on paper, and there can be real discrepancies across these countings too. How do you count? Also, how do you know who to count, right? There are different definitions of homelessness. Some of them are put into actual law. Some of them are discussed over different, through different policy. What you end up having to do is really collaborate in your subgroups to say, do we think this car should be counted? Do we think this person should be counted? Does this person look 18 to 21? Do they look 18 to 24, or sorry, 18 to 24, over 24, under 18? Are they a family? And some of the things that I've been learning when I talk to people are just all these different compromises that have to be made in collecting this information. As social scientists or just scientists, we might understand that over time, if you're trying to collect data over time, you want to have the method of collection be as consistent as possible so that you can more accurately see that change. But that means that you might be locked into these limited questions that you have in your survey, or the limited sort of understanding of homelessness that you had from the beginning. You might also be making compromises in designing the count year to year between how much information do you want and what type of information do you want. For example, Los Angeles only does a visual count. So the count that we will get this summer will be just from volunteers using their eyes. What are those volunteers seeing? That's a question I have. But in Long Beach, they do a visual count and they also do a demographic survey. So I found it really interesting to see how much the volunteer demographic survey mirrored the survey that we would do with individuals we encountered during the point in time count. What is your age? What is your race? Do you identify as transgender? Over here, these same questions are being asked. There are also going to be glitches and errors. So in each different site that I was at, that those 48 hours, we were advised that the app wasn't working great. And at the end of the night in downtown LA, when we were comparing our digital count versus our paper count, they were not the same, even though we were like in the car together, making these decisions together. Sometimes you miscount or you miswrite. So there are a lot of errors and glitches happening in this count, a lot of compromises being made in this count, um, which raises questions about accuracy. And some of the things that were emphasized so much in training, because volunteers received training for Los Angeles and Long Beach, was accuracy, safety, and empathy. But again, these things vary across site, right? So it was ironic to me that in the Los Angeles training, they advised, don't shine your flashlight in people's faces to try and see better because you want to respect people's homes. In Long Beach, working with the police, they were shining their flashlights in people's faces, trying to get their attention. And there's trade-offs in that too, because I think there are people that we might not have counted had the police not been there, but there were people that we probably did not count because the police were there. Something else I found interesting about training was this celebration of civic participation. It felt very congratulatory, and it also felt, personally, I enjoyed participating in these counts. Um, I felt like I was sort of doing a civic duty, but that's a complicated feeling as well, because I really don't know what the effect is other than this sort of bubble within my fellow volunteers. So participating in this left a lot of lingering questions. I won't go through all of them. I want to move on a little bit I want to make sure I get to the other sites. So I'll just talk about what I'm going to be doing next with this data collection. I'm going to be finishing interviews. I have colleagues at the Public Law Center who participated in the Orange County count, which I did not participate in. So my project is really supposed to be on Los Angeles, but Los Angeles is heavily influential on and influenced by Orange County. So it's hard to leave it out. And then the results are coming out. So in Orange County, they didn't do a count in 2023, I believe. They did just 2022 and 2024, and they experienced a 28% increase. Long Beach reported their first decrease in homelessness since 2017. It was a marginal decrease, like 1 or 2%, but that's still a decrease. And then LA always takes pretty long to come out with their count. The count was in January, and they're not going to release it until the summer. And so something I'm considering is having some group discussions with volunteers about the results and saying, this is what we did before. What were we expecting? Do these results line up with our experiences? And I'm also going to be cross-analyzing the count and the data from, the participant observation data from these experiences with looking at public records acts, seeing if I can request what is the metadata on the volunteers. Because while they might publish these counts on the unhoused that are following these very similar surveys, there are certain privacy rights, I think, that are protecting these volunteers in a ways that don't protect these unhoused folks. Okay, I'm going to move on to the Care Plus program. This heading, livability, if you click on it, you'll be taken to the Los Angeles City website. LA Sanitation and Environment formed the Livability Services Division in June 2019. I don't really know what their definition of livability is, but it is a name for their various programs that clean up streets and specifically clean up homeless encampments. Some of the legal background of this are this enforcement of municipal codes. So they're really just modern nuisance laws. And nuisance law has been written about so much, and just how it's a tool of racism and exclusion. But the modern versions in LA are LAMC 4118, which is the anti-sleeping, can't sleep, lay on the ground in public. And there are various maps. And then there's also the LAMC 5611, which is about property. You can't store property in public. So this was, some other researchers created a map to highlight what are these places that you can't be near in Los Angeles. You can't be near schools, you can't be near libraries, you can't be near certain other sensitive sites. So you kind of start to see how people are just banished from certain areas. There's also constitutional case law, because some of these ordinances have been challenged. There's due process rights. The Eighth Amendment is a big source of a lot of this case law. Cruel and unusual punishment, looking at, is being homeless sort of a status crime? Is the status of being homeless something that you can criminalize? And a lot of litigation in LA and Orange County has followed this middle case, Martin v. Boise, 2018, which said you can't arrest somebody for being homeless if they have nowhere else to go, because otherwise that's cruel and unusual. However, some of the responses to that by people who want to enforce these anti-camping laws anyway is to open shelters, and then you have an open bed, right? And so the logic is, you have a place to go, you just don't want to go there, you're not going there, so we get to arrest you. And of course, it's really hard to get into that bed, and it can also be, those beds are not always made to be very desirable. So I think it's quite clever and quite cruel. And the most recent case that the Supreme Court of the United States will be deciding on this summer is Grants Pass v. Johnson. So this issue has been percolating in the Ninth Circuit for a while. And now we're going to see the national ruling. There's also illegal search and seizure. There have been cases on not just the arresting and moving of people, but the moving and destruction of property. And one case in 2021 did not have a super favorable ruling, in my opinion. But there was an article, some news came out recently this year that showed that LA officials were altering the records that they were producing when they were moving, storing, destroying people's property. And so these settlements and often district court supervision, that's how, after these ordinances are challenged, judges are often overseeing, okay, now how are we going to improve these policies of enforcing these ordinances? And so that brings up a lot of like jurisdiction and authority questions. How far can the judge go in saying what to do and ordering people around? So my participant observation for this came in two different ways. One was kind of just observing, how do people know when these um, sweeps are scheduled. And they're not really publicly shared. And so what I had to do was sign up for this subtext subscription that a local reporter has, where he would be sent the schedules by somebody else, and then he would share them with the people who were subscribed. And sometimes these texts would not be sent out with a lot of warning. They might be sharing the schedule for the day when it's like 10 a.m. or 4 p.m. And these sweeps are supposed to happen like 7 a.m., 8 a.m. So it's a little late to get them. You want them the day before. And so over the summer, last summer, I was waiting for one of those days when the schedules would be sent out the day before so I could know where to go. Um, August 17th was one such day. I showed up um, and there was not a sweep happening. Um, there was what looked like the remnants of a sweep, but from my experience with other sweeps, I know showing up at 7:08 for a 7 a.m. sweep is not late. It's early. There might already be people there, but if there was a sweep going to be happening, um, there would have been people there, and there weren't. So who knows what happened in this case, and who knows how often that happens? Perhaps people got the schedule the night before, and they're like, okay, now I'm prepared. I'm going to move. Or does the city just not show up? I don't know. I have no idea. So this became something that I quickly decided not to spend too much time on because I could better spend my time elsewhere. I also started observing a weekly sweep that takes place in Venice, Fridays, 8 a.m. This picture is from those sweeps. Um, why did I choose Venice? There's a few reasons. Um, One personal reason is that one of my very first times in California, I was here to look at schools, and I was with my mom and sister, and we weren't sure if we were seeing my uncle on a bench. And so there's a connection to family history and precarity and what places they're attracted to. It was not my uncle on this bench that we thought might have been. But that was a really like poignant moment for me in the beginning of my um, life in California. I participated in citation clinic in Venice. So I have legal experience there. There's that's a regular clinic that happens where lawyers help. You can show up if you have a citation that you've gotten for um, homelessness, whether it's like drinking in public or sleeping and lying or parking tickets because you live out of your car and your car was parked in a place and they got mad. And then also because just Venice is iconic. It's a well-known place. It's a visually stimulating place. There's a lot going on. Um, and so I was interested in the varieties of data that would be collected. Um, I was surprised to see, I was aware already that at sweeps there are a lot of different groups present, but it seemed in Venice there were even more because of the geographic location. Because there are some police that are responsible for the beach. There are some police that are responsible for the sort of like park of it. There's police responsible for Venice, the city. Then you have nearby Santa Monica because the Venice Boardwalk is very close to the border with Santa Monica. And just to say a little bit more about this image, um, something that I think stands out are all these cameras, right? One of them is a media guy, one of them is a sanitation worker, one of them um, was, I think, just a spectator. And this moment in particular, I remember quite well because um, it was a morning when the sweep was going at a slower pace because we'll have different paces. Sometimes they'll be faster, sometimes they'll be slower. This was a slower pace, and sometimes there's a lot of anxiety um, being created, certainly felt due to this sort of rush of like, get out. You know this is happening. You should have gotten out by now. Um, but there was also a joke made about an early checkout, and everybody was laughing. And so these are uh, not always consistent relationships because you don't always see the same people every single time. But then again, there are consistent relationships being built through this sweep with different inflections of tension. Um, I also want to say that my approach varied over time. Sometimes I would come early and I would like follow the sanitation workers more specifically. Sometimes I would come early and set up at one bathroom and experience the sweep sort of moving past that bathroom. Um, so I wanted to gather different approaches to this experience. And ultimately I had to pause doing this observation for a few reasons. One was I think I was starting to understand that there were limitations in seeing just this sweep because this is not the only sweep that happens in Venice. There are 3 or 4 other sweeps that happen at different times, and some of those are at not very pleasant or easily accessible times for anybody involved. Like I'm saying 1 a.m., 2 a.m. in the morning. So there were just going to be limitations in what I could learn from only following this sweep. And then there are also personal limitations. My housing in the past year bounced from Long Beach to Garden Grove to UC Irvine. And dealing with my own housing, which is not so close to Venice, just made it a little bit difficult to continue. And it was the balancing of I'm starting to feel like a voyeur. I don't know what else I'm learning right now. I need to prioritize finding my own housing. So that was paused. Um, I would like to eventually do a survey. There's other data to be cross-analyzed with, such as YouTube footage. This video, if you want to go look at another time, is part of a long series that this guy has where he's just reporting, taking videos of what's going on in Santa Monica and Venice. There's also more going on with policy. I think I'll leave this for the discussion portion because I want to make sure that I get to the last site. But things that I'm keeping in the back of my mind with this program is what is the language that we use to talk about it? I was talking to a sanitation employee at one point, and I was saying, I'm here to observe this sweep, and he corrected me very quickly and said, well, we don't like to use the word sweep. I don't think he had a different word for it. But they're very sensitive of this sweep language, and their justifications for these sweeps center around safety, cleanliness, and the things that they seem to, I don't want to use the word harp, that's quite judgmental, but harp on are like drug use and waste. What are the actual things that need to be cleaned? And I don't deny that we need a healthy environment, but priorities are interesting. There's an evolution of policies I'm seeing here. How is the word care used as cover? Newsom's program when he was the mayor of SF, Care Not Cash, had a lot of criticisms. Now he's the governor, pushing forward this care court. Mayor Bass's Inside Safe program has had a lot of criticism. Los Angeles Community Action Network has been pushing to look at how this ordinance 4118 is supposed to, people are supposed to report on it. Legally mandated, they're supposed to report on it. There was an initial report about effectiveness produced in November, but it was sat on until March. And there's still further reports that need to come out that have not. And the things that linger really for me are how disruptive this sweep is. Disruptive to people's time, sense of time, disruptive to people's property, disruptive to people's emotional lives. These, for the more scholarly, interested folks, are keywords for different writings, different scholars that I'm trying to think with. Last thing I'll say on this is privacy. When these sweeps are happening, the point is that services are also supposed to be offered and provided in building relationships with unhoused people during these sweeps. But there seems to be a really interesting sort of economic exchange happening in which these services cannot be provided just because it's apparent that you need them. You have to provide all of this private information in return. Okay. Stick with me. Public Record Act requests. So I've kind of talked about these different pieces of data that get produced through different types of encounters. There's the sweep that produces different types of data. There's the point in time count that produces data. These forms of data are getting used in lawsuits, in daily advocacy, in the criminalization and surveillance of people. And how do we as citizens understand what this data is? So I consider my participant observation archiving to be dual-veined. So one is using the actual Public Records Act request process that exists in LA. And in LA, they have this Next Request website. And of course, it doesn't work very well. There was one time I noticed that the whole site was down. Let me switch my share. To sorry, having sharing difficulties. Okay, I'll trust that you can go look at that website yourself. I want to make sure that I show you in general what I'm talking about with this records request. So there's a platform, there's an online platform, and one time I was trying to access it because I needed to check up on this request that I had submitted myself, and I saw that the whole website was down, so I began an hours and days long process of calling up 311 to let them know that their website was down. And most people didn't have any idea what I was talking about when I said the Public Records Act request platform. But it is a platform that exists. And you can submit requests to different departments. and you can craft in plain language what the record is that you want to see. There's also laws that say that your record should be responded to within 10 days. In my experience, that never happens. I submitted a request in December specifically to the sanitation department wanting to know what records they produced through the Care and Care Plus program in different places. Um, it wasn't until April that they got back to me after I'd made a bunch of calls and tracked down a human being that could help me. Um, and their response was only to say, this is too large of a request. Please make it smaller. I responded within a few days to make it smaller, and I haven't heard anything since. So it's a slow process. It's a difficult process. But the website also has this whole history, at least going back to 2019, of records that have been submitted. So there's this archive of Public Records Act requests as well. And so my plan is to do some analysis and see like who are making these, like which people are making these requests, what are the things that they are interested in, are they successful in getting the records that they are asking for. And then the other vein is a lot of the work that I have done just spending time with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. This is a community organization that has a lot of different fights going on. They're looking at data-driven policing, how surveillance affects youth, how universities are complicit, how does surveillance and policing affect gender and sexuality? What is the budget? How are cops paying for this? And then the architecture of surveillance, which I'll get to a little bit more. The coalition hosts meetings often on Zoom and in person, and they're open to the public. When they are in person, they're housed in Los Angeles Community Action Network, which has a building in the heart of Skid Row. So I've gone to meetings there, also on Zoom, and there's another citation clinic, like the one that I talked about in Venice, also happens with at LACAM. So I've been involved in a few different working groups, and one of the across the working groups, I think, is a consistent practice of using public records and creating requests like with the community in groups to get information about what's going on. They have a whole zine about it. I honestly have learned more about Public Records Act requests and how to use them from the coalition than I did in law school or just in my legal experience. And there are two specific projects that I would love to quickly shout out. One of them is Watch the Watchers. There's been a lot of lawsuits about this project. It began when a reporter did a request for the roster of the LAPD. And he did that in a few different cities. So LA is not the only one. And he also wanted pictures. And they had to fight to get those records, lawsuits and lawsuits. And then once those records were released, so many lawsuits followed because the city was mad that these records were out there. They wanted to claw them back. The police were upset because some of them apparently were afraid that even though that, they're public officials, interfacing with the public is their job, their face might be out there. And then the police union sued the chief. There's like anti-SLAPP lawsuits going on. But the point is that we using this, like you and me, using this tool created by the coalition can identify officers, and this might have an impact on people who have been brutalized at protests or people who are getting harassed in Skid Row. And so being able to identify by name, by number, by face, even by income, who these officers are can be really valuable. And the income is important because sometimes people will go to protests, and if the police are there, you can pull up this tool and look up how much these officers that are standing there are making and ask them, like, do you enjoy these benefits that you get, these hundreds of thousands of dollars that you get for standing here as we try to assert our rights. You can click around. There's more stuff about the lawsuits. They are also trying to do a similar project with UCLA police right now. Also plugging Watch the Watchers, They Lie videos. This is about cop watching and going up and just trying to ask cops for information. They're quite humorous, I think. And then the Architecture Surveillance Project. So this is an ongoing project that we're working on. I was going to try and share my screen, but since we're getting close to time, and I also already struggled to switch my share, I'll just briefly say, keep your eyes peeled for this project. This is also about information gathering, power mapping, community education, exposing and dismantling the architecture of surveillance, which is not just guns and riot gear shields. It is data collection, it is policing strategies, it is corporate profit, and it is the targeting of specific groups. And so this original table from 2015 is what we're updating to be more current with, current tech, current analyses, current use cases. I think the things that this site brings up for me are questions about what is a record, because when we actually get these records produced, it's very interesting to see how we try to interpret it, because we don't know the sort of bureaucratic logics of how documents are stored or created or filed. Figuring out how to ask for a record. Something that I think the coalition very strongly talks about is we're not interested in rights, we're interested in our fights. The idea is that our rights are already kind of limited. We have to, sue and fight to get them even acknowledged. So what is the, if we don't look at, if we don't like build our ethos, build our work around rights, what is the fight that we're trying to enact? What is the thing that we're trying to secure for our community? I could say more on the future of data, but again, we're short on time and I want to leave room for discussion. So my conclusion, or conclusions, I don't really have one. I hate the 405. That's like probably the most solid conclusion that I have from this project. But on a more serious note, the encampment is somehow seen as a threat. We see this, and I'm not the only person making this analysis. We see this in the way that unhoused people are treated. They're brutalized in the middle of the night and have all of their possessions taken from them. Their valuable, necessary possessions like medication and documents and things they need to live. But they also do it to students. Student encampments are a threat. And somehow this is seen as subversive social architecture. But the architecture is really community building outside of these controlled methods of policing. So yesterday, I don't know if you followed the news on UCI, at least 20 different police organizations, police agencies came to campus to quell what was a very peaceful protest against the horrific genocide against Gaza that Israel is perpetrating right now. And on my way back from work, I wasn't even able to drive onto campus where I currently live in emergency housing because I had to leave another place. And I couldn't get onto campus because these cops needed to um, secure what? I don't know. Um, so I don't know what else to say, really, except I'm trying to allude to the connections between policing, surveillance, um, and who has a right to access safe housing. Um, I'll leave it at that. I'll stop talking. There's a lot more to say, a lot more to question, but I would love to hear what else people have to say. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, Maggie, we would like to have some questions, maybe like stop share and we just open it up to everyone. How does that sound? All right, good. So this is a great opportunity if other people want to turn on their cameras or just ask questions. We can take a few moments to do this. It's really, thank you so much for taking your time, really valid research and unfortunately quite relevant right now in our space. Any questions? There's a question in the chat.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you also to my friends, family, colleagues that I see here. What's the most surprising finding I've had in this work? I don't know that there's like a specific fact. I feel like all the facts that I learned, whether it's like how much money has been spent or what partnerships there are or how brutal things can be, are they're just like these things that I'm aware of have been reinforced by the facts. I think what I have I think I also set out with this project knowing that it was going to be kind of sad and heartbreaking. And so I think the surprise comes from the uh, joy and the persistent community that I'm able to build through this project, and the hope, because I think people are trying to build a better world amidst this kind of like hellscape that we are living in right now. Um, and I guess that shouldn't be surprising either because that feels very human to me. Um, but I'm surprised by how much more of it there is than I was expecting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maggie. Anybody else have any other questions? I guess I have a follow-up question. What are your next steps?
Moving,
Yeah.
moving, wrapping up data collection. I really probably have enough that I could just start writing. I'm sure my advisors would tell me that. But there are like loose ends that I feel like I would like to sort of tie up.
Yeah.
And then just writing, um, and analysis. And my work as an eviction attorney, a defense attorney continues as well. So I think, you know, my PhD is not my whole life.
Right.
Greg Greg is my father. Hi,
Yeah.
Dad. What kind of knowledge are you looking for in documenting how the interaction was experienced by the homeless? Stories, their own words. I don't know. This is, I think, what I feel the most anxious about still as well. Because I'm conscious of the platform that my project could be for them, whether it's very small or very big. And I'm also conscious of their time and what they would get out of it. So I think I'm trying to develop a survey for Venice and ask not just unhoused people and the sort of city employees that are participating in the sweep, but also neighbors, the artists that are around, to just give them an opportunity to share their their experience. Neek, thank you. I look forward to talking more about all of this.
Yeah, Maggie, thank you so much. Any other questions? Wonderful conversation. Any other questions or thoughts? You can put it in the chat, or you can use your voice. I work in the arts. You can dance it out, whatever it looks like. All right. Well, Maggie, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Melissa just popped in. You know,
That's my mom. Hey, mom.
yeah,
Thanks.
awesome. So, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to hearing more about your work. And hope you have the best day that one can have during this current situation and climate. And sending lots of energy and grace to everyone. And I appreciate everyone attending today.
Yeah.
So, thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you, everyone.